if you look around you, the technology is changing so quickly. And what we're going to propose tonight is that the identification and utilization of expertise will really change the supply chain. And what is an expert? An expert is someone who can tell the difference. In other words, with very little information, the expert can tell the difference between what a unique client wants and everything else that they've done before. An expert can identify what they do differently from everybody else. They can tell the difference. The second thing an expert can do is they can see into the future, and this is critical. So I'm going to start off by using my water bottle here. And let's say, and this is just an example, I'm going to run this dropping of the water bottle 100 times in my test. And the question is, how many times do I have to run this before everybody gets real comfortable that they can know what's going to happen before I drop it? Right? Kind of a simple thing. But what transpires, if you understand this and you understand expertise, it changes everything. For example, everyone should be associated with the law of gravity. You should have known, being exposed to it since you were little. If I say I'm going to run 100 tests, before I even run the first test, you should know what's going to happen before I release this water bottle. In other words, you can actually know what's going to happen before it happens, or the other way to say this, you can see into the future, right? So basically, if you're an expert in understanding this, and you could be an expert in any unique area, and you can actually see into the future, and you can tell the difference. Does an expert think more or less? Okay, now, this is what we're going to do, because the paradigm is so different that I want you to use the chat boxes, and you can just say more or less, or, you know, this is more, this is less. Okay, so I want you all to respond, and after I get 3 or 4 responses, I'll move on, because I can see that you're still following the logic. So, an expert who can see into the future, do they think more or less? Hit it in your chat boxes, everybody. I see one answer, which is right. Okay, one person said more. It is less, right? Because when you can see into the future, you always think less, which means the only time we have to think about this, which always will lead to decision, is when we don't know what's going to happen. So therefore, an expert thinks less. Now, to make people think, is that an optimal thing or something that we shouldn't do? If you're an expert and we're going to make the other stakeholders think who we're working with, I know how to explain this, okay? Let's say in an organization, this is the boss and these are workers. Is this an optimal thing when the boss always tells everybody what to do? Okay, so everybody knows it's not optimal. Now, is this optimal where the worker passes information to their boss? 90% of all people will think that this is a good thing. But see, I'm actually mixing 2 simple concepts together. If the workers are passing their boss information, does the boss have to think more or think less? Most of you got it. The boss is to think more. Now, what's associated with thinking more after getting a constant feed of information? Stress. So every boss, after they just get so much information back, they're going to have to cut off the flow of information. They're going to have to think about it, which I already said this is not an expert, right? So they're going to think about it, and then they're going to have to make a decision. So thinking always leads to decision. Then when the boss makes a decision, then the boss has to do what? To relay that decision to everyone else, this. And we know this is not optimal. But yet, 90% of all people think that this is optimal, not realizing that this always leads to what? This. But people don't know that, right? Because they can't see into the what? Into the future. It's quite an interesting paradigm. Because as supply chain managers, procurement managers, professionals, stakeholders, we actually believe that passing information is a vital part of our wheelhouse. It's what brings us value. Now, let me ask another question. The more information that's passed between parties, does that increase the risk to the project we're doing or decrease the risk as we pass more information? The correct answer should be the more information that's flown between parties, the risk goes up. Now, think about this. If you have a difficult project and you increase the number of stakeholders you want to get involved, and then you increase the amount of information that's flowing between all the stakeholders, does the risk to the project increase or decrease? Hit your chat boxes. Increase the information flow, increase the number of stakeholders, the risk should what? You got it, increase. Now, I can propose to you that the PMBOK for project managers, right? The body of knowledge says, whenever you have a difficult project, you should always increase the number of stakeholders who are involved. You should increase the flow of information. You should get everyone's input. And really, that's basically what Agile is. But if you do that, you actually increase the risk to the project, which is amazing. The solution actually increases the risk. But many people don't realize that. So for example, in the supply chain, if I have an expert and I want to utilize this expertise, should I pass more information to that expert or less information? We should pass less information. Because if you pass more information, you're only helping those who are not expert in whatever you're trying to get done. But yet, in our supply chain, the client is very comfortable with passing a lot of information and making sure that everyone gets that information, not realizing that they're actually increasing the risk and finding less expert vendors and who are using less expert people, which is quite interesting. So as far as identifying and utilizing expertise, they can always tell the difference. They need less information. They can see into the future. And the last thing they can do is they can make things simple. And why should they make things simple? Because an expert who is truly expert in their area of expertise realizes when they get into a room with all the stakeholders, they begin to realize that the stakeholders do not understand what's going to happen before it happens because they don't have expertise. And therefore, the expert always quickly comes to the conclusion, if their stakeholders are non-expert, they better simplify, because all the experts are going to do, if it's, quote, not simplified, is they're going to start thinking, and then they're going to start making decisions, and then they're going to increase problems to the project, which we know that 90% of all problems caused on any project are always caused by the non-expert stakeholders. And an expert knows this. So the expert will simplify so that everybody can understand. And the way they simplify it, because they realize others don't have their expertise, they have created two, quote, requirements for simplicity. Number one, they make sure that any requirement is observable. So two people looking, quote, at a requirement that can be observed should not disagree that I'm holding one water bottle. If there's any type of disagreement, it will start creating what? This, right? And I've lost it, and the expert has lost it. So they realize that it has to be observable. Therefore, if they identify a requirement, or the client has identified a requirement and two people disagree on what they're observing, that metric is thrown away. We do not use that metric because it's complicated. It forces stakeholders to think. And as soon as stakeholders think, they're going to make decisions, and they won't be able to identify and utilize expertise. Now, what's the other requirement with this? Not only has it to be observable, it has to be countable. Countable means I can say that's 1, that's 2, that's 3, and that's 4. Now, if we put a string of operations that are actually countable or very elementary, it doesn't matter, because the normal person who is not an expert cannot do multiple operations on the numbers and come up with the same answer. They just can't do it. Therefore, any metric, quote, that the expert uses to communicate has to be observable and countable. And the number of operations have to be 1, maybe 2, and that's it. Otherwise, they're going to start thinking. And we now have identified that when people think, they only think because they don't understand, and it's going to lead to a decision. And when they make their decision, it doesn't matter if they have expertise around, they're not going to utilize the expertise. Do I have any questions on this? This is really important. We have, quote, tested these concepts out over 2,000 times. And we have confirmed that these are natural laws. What's the movement in our supply chain? Hopefully all of you agree that they're going to automate everything that they can automate, right? And I'm going to show you this. Anything that can be automated will be automated. Well, what's the biggest advantage of automation? It's when people don't have to gather all the information, don't have to think about it, don't have to make decisions, don't have to, quote, explain to other people why they're doing something. Because if it's automated, then no communication needs to be done. And in the supply chain, the utilization of automation will mean that somehow we have a way to identify and utilize expertise by minimizing communication, by minimizing the number of people who need to understand what that expertise is. Okay, so simply it goes in a slightly different path than what we normally are comfortable with.
If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to our channel for more content. If you have any questions about the best value approach or for Dr. Dean, leave them in the comment section below and we'll get to them in a later video. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.